On today's dreadful episode, I Am the Law, we delve right into the dystopic sci-fi worlds of Judge Dredd and Starship Troopers. Maybe there's a pitch in there somewhere as well. Fascism, colonialism, Nazism, oh my! Cheerful and lighthearted things such as these await on The Pitch Pod. Welcome to the Pitch Pod. We are the pod group, and we are here to pitch you on all things nerdy, geeky, dorky, dweeby, and lame. I want to give a huge shout out before we begin. Mr. Robot won Outstanding Interactive Extension of a Linear Program last night.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. That is the creative Emmys. I think I didn't know. I was trying to look at like headlines and like things to talk about. I really couldn't find anything that was like super out there outside of what Andrew already took. But I saw that there is a difference between the regular Emmys and creative Emmys. And so I took a look at the creative Emmy winners. And basically it just looks like all the unimportant Emmys are, part of the creative version, I guess. So the only big ones that I saw, Outstanding Animated Program.
Rick and Morty for Vat of Acid.
Yeah, which BoJack Horseman totally should have won with The View from Halfway Down, but whatever. The other congratulations goes to Outstanding Sound Editing for a limited series, movie, or special, Watchmen. Good job. Outstanding host for a reality or competition program, RuPaul. I feel like RuPaul's probably won that every single year for the past decade.
Has Drag Race been on that long? I guess it has.
It has been, for as long as I can remember. At least a decade.
Yeah, that's like last year.
Let's see. Cheer won Outstanding Unstructured Reality Program. And then the Outstanding Documentary or Nonfiction Series was The Last Dance. Lost to Tiger King and McMillions.
So did Tiger King win?
No, The Last Dance won. I think I totally phrased that incorrectly.
Yeah, you really did.
But The Last Dance won. They're the winners of the creative Emmy, and Tiger King lost, which I don't really know how to judge a documentary, but I wasn't necessarily like either of those. I was like, oh my god, this is incredible. Whatever. Shout out to those guys. The real Emmys are tonight. I was really just about to move on. I don't know.
Okay. I was just confused. We just jumped in to the whole thing. And
I just kept talking, and that's why I have y'all.
Set up to what's happening. So
I just immediately I was like,
if you had just started with the real Emmys are whatever, and here are these fake Razzie type things, I was like, what's happening? I literally had no idea. I didn't know what we were doing, what we looked at.
Probably should have ran that by y'all.
Probably, I was just like, is he reading off the cuff?
I thought we were going to introduce ourselves. Just be like, hi, I'm Andrew. Hi, I'm Victor. Yeah.
I totally forgot to introduce ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
I'm just so
you could
ready
try
to
doing
go.
that now. Too late.
Yeah.
We didn't introduce ourselves or our topic.
Damn.
You can fix that in post.
Probably.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, guys. My name's Grant, for those that don't know. I have Andrew here.
Yeah.
And then there's Victor.
Yo.
We're going to work on introducing ourselves later.
Yeah. Did you know that the creative fake Emmys were recently, Grant? Do you have opinions?
Nice. Then I'll transfer it over. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'll let y'all know. If not, I'll just cut some things out. That's the beauty of Audacity.
Yeah, that was pretty audacious of you.
At least, give us a link to the full list so we can have opinions.
I mean, yeah. That's fair. I was just, looking at things. I was like, I don't know what to talk about.
I was like, I guess the Emmys were... It's weird they were not on Sunday. And then, yeah, okay.
Well, I didn't think that they were, super important because they were creative Emmys. So I didn't think that y'all necessarily wanted to talk about it. I kind of just wanted to shit on the fact that there's not just one centralized Emmy.
Yeah, but you're shitting on things people like. People want to talk about that. You're like, Watchmen fucking won a thing.
Well, I mean, Watchmen's gonna win a bunch of things tonight, I'm assuming. And so, just throw off the... they're not gonna put that in their production room and be like, this is the one we won. They're gonna put up the one, the important Emmys that they won. Okay. What the fuck are we doing? Want to just move on to headlines?
Yeah.
That was your headline, wasn't it?
Yeah, I thought that was set up as your headline.
Fair enough.
Yeah, what I've been doing with my week was trying to hunt down a PlayStation 5, which gets us into the overall good and bad news that they've got. So last week, early September, Xbox came out. Somebody leaked the price of the Xbox Series S and then the Series X, and instead of pulling a Sony and trying to deny things that were clearly true, they went ahead and confirmed and threw out Xbox Series S is this thing. It's a lower performance box that will still play anything the Series X does. It will still make your Xbox One games and previous games, some of those, look better. And then it also introduced the Series X at $499, which functions as a next-gen console. So it's like they introduced their Pro already. Well, really, it's more like they introduced a half step. They didn't quite do what they did this generation, where they made something that was like a PS Pro type thing.
Right.
But they did something equally interesting. And also, in the move of Microsoft is doing games as service, they introduced this amazing payment plan, which was $25 a month for a Series S, $35 a month for a Series X, and that includes Game Pass Ultimate Edition, which is $15. So over a 2-year period, you end up paying $60 less, I think, on the Series X than you would if you got all of those things individually with the payment plan, and $10 less if you get the Series S than you would if you got all those things individually with the payment plan over a 2-year period. Now, they've got you in the sense of, why would you not continue to have Game Pass afterwards? Because Game Pass is the best deal going on in gaming at the moment. And PlayStation being faced with this, I listened on the podcast, I'm literally recorded 3 or 4 times over the last couple months we've been doing this, of saying, I don't Xbox, I ain't never gonna Xbox. After Xbox did that thing, I went, I might Xbox. Xbox. And then PlayStation kind of was totally silent, scrambled for a response that came out. And then it's just been nothing but scrambling ever since, because they botched the pre-orders. This thing's been selling out in literal a minute on websites that have been crashing. I may or may not have secured one. I truly don't know at this point. So the question is, for you guys, what's the smart play? I know for me what I think the smart play is, and it's waiting a year for whatever. But I also know what my heart wants. And I forgot I actually saved money to buy it.
Yeah, they're the same price, right?
The high-end ones, yeah. I guess that's the other part of it. The PS5 has an all-digital version that has no disc drive, and it's $100 cheaper, so it's at $400 or $399 price point. And then the standard is $499. So, but they introduced Demon Souls will be a launch game. Victor, I feel like that should make you excited.
It did. It did make me excited.
It didn't do anything for me, but Miles Morales, a launch game,
that made me very excited.
So
Spider-Man, Sony's Spider-Man was amazing.
Yeah, that was so good.
That launch trailer honestly looked like a movie. It was super impressive.
Here's the thing about Miles. It's also going to be a PS4 game. So, which kind of, what Sony has done nothing but undercut all of its messaging at nearly every turn. There were rumors that PS5 pre-orders were going to go live the first week of September, and Sony's media put out as I think we're going to put out more than a moment's notice before pre-orders go up, guys. Then they do the event, and it says pre-orders start tomorrow. And Walmart went, we're going to go ahead and start tonight. And then once Walmart did, everybody else did. So anybody who went, we're starting to... I'll get mine tomorrow, was greeted by a lot of empty stock. But Xbox launches their pre-orders on the 22nd, so we'll see how that goes.
Well, what comes out of the, what launch titles are a part of Xbox? Is there
anything special? They have 1,000 old games available through Game Pass. Their launch games are pretty light. They got Gears Tactics, which is a Gears of War game. It's a Gears of War Tactics game, hence the name. I had the list of launch titles for Xbox.
Is it basically Fire Emblem meets Gears of War?
I think it's more like XCOM meets Gears of War.
Oh, that's a bummer. I was really looking forward to joining the Locust House.
Yeah, so they have like no exclusives from what I'm seeing. The games coming to X and S at launch will be Assassin's Creed, multi-platform, Dirt 5, FIFA 21, Fortnite, Gears 5, an upgraded Gears 5, Gears Tactics, Marvel's Avengers, NBA 2K21, Tetris Effect, which is at its heart a 2-year-old game, 3-year-old game, Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is probably going to be very good, but is also multi-platform. Watch Dogs Legion, which is multi-platform. The Falconeer, which I don't know anything about. And Observer System Redux, which I don't know anything about. So you got the sports games and then multi-platform games.
It seems pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I think you got the right play of just holding off until we get something a little bit cheaper here.
I think the right play would be to build a good PC. Hashtag PC Master Race.
That seems like work. And
you're not wrong.
I never understood that concept of like building your own PC.
You're not wrong. Although,
but I also, I'm the type of guy that doesn't know what the difference between resolution and frame rate is. So
that's fair. No, I think, I think I would do that for at least to accommodate like the new VR, because I know that the Quest 2 came out like yesterday, right?
Yeah, I think it came out recently.
Yeah, it was recently.
You gotta have a Facebook account for that, Victor.
Yeah, I know. That kind of bums me out. I might just build my own computer. But no, I mean, that would be my play for like the year. But if we're looking at like long term, I would definitely wait the year out to get the PS5. I'm in complete agreement with you. Primarily because like God of War Ragnarok isn't coming out until 2021 anyway. So. Oh
yeah, that was the other fun thing about the PS5 announcement. So PS5 didn't offer anything remotely like the payment plan that, again, it just boggles my mind. My mind is in a game of boggle, just popping away at how good a deal that is. PlayStation's answer to that was, oh, hey, by the way, we'll give you a pool of games as part of your PS Plus subscription that are PlayStation 4 classics. So stuff like Arkham Knight, Uncharted games, the first God of War for PS4, Last of Us.
Bloodborne?
Bloodborne's on there.
Okay.
And Persona 5 is on there. Persona 5 Peasant is on there, not even the Royal. I'll explain once we're going to end up doing an SMT game at some point for Grant's Fate, to explain Grant's Face.
Persona 5 Peasant?
I have no idea what y'all talking about.
For those in the know. But the thing about that is, all of those games are at least 2 years old. And the fact that Sony is throwing us scraps and pretending it's a feast is very insulting. All of these games should have already been on PS Now, like permanently, as a permanent home. But Sony just locks them away and it's like, you'll pay for it. I don't want to give it to you for free. Whereas Xbox is like, day and date new Halo game is on Game Pass. Whereas Sony is just like, you're gonna buy God of War 2. We're gonna sell 10 million copies of God of War 2, and then maybe we'll discount it. And then in 3 or 4 years, if we're really suffering, we'll throw it out to you for free for 3 months. So I'm very tired of Sony, but also I spent a lot of time looking for a PS5.
In the grand scheme of console wars, Xbox and PlayStation going at it, the biggest news for me was Nintendo Switch released Monster Hunter Direct. Woo.
Boo. Nobody cares.
It's just one of those things where, like, I don't really get how... Like, I love Nintendo to death, right? But I don't really get how they can just have a single game Direct while... Like, for their holiday, I guess, premiere. You know what I mean?
I mean, number one, you're reading that Direct all wrong. Because the main takeaway of that Direct wasn't Monster Hunter. It was that Hades was released on that day. And that's because you're not a gamer, Grant.
I know. I'm fake.
What Monster Hunters you played, man?
Dude, is Monster Hunter the bro gaming? That never struck me as that. ever.
That's the biggest selling Capcom game ever.
Is it really? I remember
Monster
the
Hunter
older
World.
ones in the franchise. They were like super heavy RPG. That's crazy that's like more accessible of a franchise now. Good for them.
They made World. That was definitely the bro-ish entry.
The bro.
Bro-ish.
Bro, Monster Hunter is so sick, dude. I've got like a level 25. Like,
Love kill monsters and whatnot. Life won't find a way around me. But so Grant, you were excited for the Monster Hunters, or weren't excited?
Oh,
I'm not clear.
No, not at all. I was being totally facetious there.
Okay. I mean, they did have a lot of people were excited about the Monster Hunter games. People really like those games for the Nintendo 3DS, and then Monster Hunter Generations is pretty popular. Not as popular as World, but people like those games a lot. Hades was introduced. Hades is very good. I forget what else was on the Direct. The only thing I got from it was Hades, in that I literally went out and purchased it that day.
What type of game is that?
It's a roguelike adventure game, so it's done by Supergiant Games, who I think Microsoft may have just bought, which is another point in Xbox's long-term favor. But they did Bastion, Transistor, I want to think something else, but I don't think I bought that one. Hades' concept is that you're playing as Hades' son, trying to escape the underworld, and it's a roguelike, so you die a lot. But they incorporate you dying into the story. So you're trying to break out, and it's a roguelike, so it's procedurally generated. You won't go through the same route same amount of times, and you get a reward for clearing each room that you go in. So you go through 10 chambers to get to a boss. You could have 10 different power-ups in each of those chambers to try to get you ready for that first boss.
it's a little Binding of Isaac-y.
Did you say Isaac-y?
Binding of Isaac.
E.
Yeah, I thought Victor said it
the
wrong.
adjective form of being like Binding of Isaac.
Oh.
I've played. You get and the other aspect of it is you get a little stronger each time you die. So
Really?
if you're having trouble, if you just die enough, eventually you'll be so overpowered you should be able to walk through it.
So really quickly, as far as like, just like a regression back to the consoles, their backwards compatibility, is it like a limited backwards compatibility, or is everything that was playable on my PS4 playable on my PS5? And then
they've
same
said
question for Xbox.
They've said 99% of what was playable for PS4 is playable on your PS5.
Cool.
That does not extend to PS3, 2, or 1.
Right. That I remembered reading.
But they said 99%, which leaves the open question of what is the 1% of games?
It's probably more sizable than just the 1%, honestly. It'd be crazy, for example, if like the Mass Effect remasters like came out and then I wasn't able to play those on my PS5.
Yes, okay, I see what you're saying. Well, number one, I would be very surprised if they didn't have a version for the PS5.
Oh, like a PS5 specific version?
Yeah. But no, you'll be able to do that. I see what you're doing. But you're doing it too early since you also asked about Xbox. And to answer that, you can, if you have an Xbox, you can play Mass Effect Trilogy right now because EA Access is part of the Xbox Game Pass.
Oh my god, I wish I had an Xbox right now. I never thought I'd be saying that. I kind of wish I had an Xbox right now.
With as much as you've brought up Halo in the course of all this, I kind of assumed you were an Xbox person.
No, I was a Halo person, and then Halo 4 came out, and then I wasn't. Well, man, this is going to be like a really specific question. Do they still have the multiplayer from Mass Effect 3? Can I still play that?
That is a very specific question for someone who has never played a Mass Effect game.
Really? You've never? Holy shit. Dude, you have to jump in. I'm
sorry. I played Andromeda.
No, it's not. No, it's really not the same thing.
It's
really
it's
not
all the same. It's fine.
It's really not.
Victor, how would you recommend play? How can I play a Mass Effect if I don't have a EA Access now?
Oh shit! There's no way, dude. There's no way. You have to get like the old school 360, or you'd have to wait until the remaster to come out at the end of October. But that's not soon enough.
That's it.
It's not soon enough. You've got to do it right now. I recommend that you find, if you don't have a 360 and you somehow manage to find old copies of the Mass Effect games, crush them into like a thin powder, put them in a suspension, and then hook up an IV and see if that works, dude, because you need to play them like now, right now.
I'm no game out. I mean, I don't understand video game design fundamentally, but it doesn't seem like that's the best way to ingest the games.
I mean, I don't know, dude. VR is pretty crazy, so we're just one step away from just injecting ourselves with IV games. That's all I'm saying. That's my official point. But yeah, the re-release comes out on October 20th. Late October. As far as like the leaks have confirmed, I don't think there's been any official confirmation. But it also lines up with pretty much everybody's, and when I say pretty much everybody, I mean like every YouTuber who has anything to do with Mass Effect. That was everybody's prediction, that we would see a late October release in 2020, notwithstanding the pandemic, of course.
So we'll expect it sometime Q1 2021.
Yeah, honestly, that would probably be like a more realistic estimation. But I am happy. It's coming out on every single platform. It's actually slightly cheaper for Switch, which is kind of weird, but...
Hell yeah. Fake gamer boy. Can't wait. Play Mass Effect on the Switch.
Honestly, whatever gets more people playing Mass Effect, the original trilogy at the very least, I totally support. I'm really hoping that they implement the multiplayer, because I really miss that. The Mass Effect 3 multiplayer was like surprisingly a lot of fun, despite the fact that was back at the time when EA was starting to introduce like loot boxes into their business model. But this is definitely a good time to jump into the series.
Yeah. So Grant, what are you gonna play Mass Effect on?
Oh, easily the Nintendo Switch. I am I have no plans on buying a PlayStation or an Xbox anytime soon. Also, your boy has very low income. Shout out part-time jobs. And yeah, we're kind of at that point where don't really get no Christmas money anymore, or Tooth Fairy money, or any sort of imaginary creature-esque money. So
imaginary.
Yeah, we're sticking to the Switch, the one I already have, and we're gonna enjoy it there.
All
right. Well, in other news, the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer dropped. I don't know how many days ago from now. Andrew, you said you saw it. What do you think about it?
I think it looks like more of the Mandalorian, which is good. I like the mysterious coded woman, because everybody seems very sure Rosario Dawson is going to be playing Ahsoka, but I'm pretty sure that who we saw is whoever is playing Sabine, since we know from Rebels that Sabine and Ahsoka are traveling around together in the post-Empire Endor world. So that would make sense. I see them just being here for an episode or two, not being important to the overall story. I'm interested to see where it goes. I don't know what the end game of The Mandalorian is, if it's supposed to be lead us to finding more about Mandalore, or if it's supposed to be leading us to finding more about Yoda's people, or if it's just supposed to be the lone wolf and cub adventures.
Yeah, that's the one thing I really enjoyed really enjoyed season 1, but I don't know how much longer they can take exactly that, the bear cub dynamic, if they can just keep doing that and it's going to keep working, or if they're going to have to like change the entirety of the setup. I am super excited for the potential of Ahsoka Tano and Sabine. Well, less Sabine, but I do agree. I can see it kind of just being more of a throwaway. Super excited to bring back my boy Giancarlo Esposito. I feel like he is the pinnacle of douchebag villain roles. Yeah, but you disagree?
No, I just think... I mean, yeah, I guess I do.
I don't necessarily qualify him as douchebag villain roles. I think of him more as like cold and calculating.
That's kind of exactly where I was gonna go with that too. I'm like, he's not a douchebag. He's not like, bro, Walter, make me this meth, dude. He cuts a guy's throat open.
I guess, yeah, cold and calculating then. Wrong adjective, my bad.
I think he voices Lex Luthor in one of the cartoon shows, which seems like very perfect casting.
Yeah, when Giancarlo Esposito talks, it reminds me of my grandfather if my grandfather hated me.
What?
Dude, he has that tone, dude. You hear Giancarlo Esposito and you're like, if he was speaking to me warmly right now, I would feel loved. But he's not. He's not. He's just like, I need you to do this for me or I'll kill you.
I'm currently watching him on The Boys Season 2. and he's playing the exact same role. Yeah, he really does play the exact same type of villain, but he's got that shit down.
You know, I can't figure out if that type of villain would survive and thrive in Dredd, or if the judges would be able to suss them out. Because definitely, I'm sure they're surviving in Starship Troopers.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. I guess we can find out now if we want to get into the pitch. Andrew.
Okay, that was almost a legitimate question, but okay, yeah.
Oh, okay, we can actually talk. I didn't know if you wanted to literally talk about it and then get into the pitch, or...
I mean, I was like, it's an interesting lead-in transition.
It's definitely an interesting
moment,
question.
But so possibly reasons why they might survive. So Dredd is this absolutely American pop culture identity that was created by British people, which I never would have guessed. But they just, in the late 70s, one of the creators watched Dirty Harry and was like, let's take this to its logical, terrible conclusion of renegade cop deciding who lives and who dies. And so that was John Wagner, Carlos Esquerra, and Pat Mills, who created Dredd in the late 70s for the comic strip 2000 AD. Dredd's actually the longest running comic strip in that series. Consistently, yeah. So he's been running since 79. A, I didn't realize that the strip was that old. And, B, I didn't realize it was British. But they were thoroughly inspired by the American culture they were seeing coming out of the 70s. Trashy New York cinema. Mm-hmm. And that New York looked trashy and was, like, anybody who's watched Taxi Driver, they just, again, took that to logical conclusions for their science fiction. So it's set in Mega City 1, which encapsulates from Boston to New York City, I think. And so the world is a nuclear wasteland, as all science fiction worlds are for the 1950s onward.
For everything until the end of the Cold War.
Right. It's that nuclear wasteland. Humanity is in these giant hub cities with towers, and the only thing enforcing the law is different notes. Judge Dredd. Giancarlo absolutely would thrive in a RoboCop world, but that's a different thing altogether. So 2000 AD, the strip that the magazine Dredd went through has been a much bigger deal than I knew anything about before we got into this. Pretty much every major British writer who wrote comics has passed through. Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, and, like I said last week, we're contrasting Dredd with Starship Troopers, which was originally written by Robert Heinlein, who has a different pedigree, let's say, than a Neil Gaiman, a Grant Morrison, or a Alan Moore, whereas Alan Moore is a literal witch or warlock. Robert Heinlein is generously called a right-wing rattlesabler. Saber rattler. Got that?
Rattlesabler.
Yeah.
There it is.
Words can be hard. We're looking at the movies. We're not going to look at the 90s Judge Dredd movie, really. I do want to call your attention, introducing again the blind pitch. So Grant and Victor were instructed not to watch this until this moment, and we're gonna piece together their reactions, and this will be in the show notes, so try to just take a piece of paper as well, dear listener, and see if you can figure out what the plot of this item is. So if you're following along at home, you can open the link, watch the video, and then join us. If you're not gonna go with that, then we'll tell you what the video is when you get back, and you'll just experience one moment of disconcerting silence.
That is so loud. I just put that thing on full blast. Okay, we're starting now. Judge this!
I'm the chaos. Damn. That actually made that movie look really sick.
That cannot be a real trailer.
Yeah, that was on the Amazon.
That is the best thing.
That's sick. That movie looks sick.
I love the 90s.
Victor, what do you think the plot of the 1994 Judge Dredd movie
Who the fuck knows? It just looks badass. Sylvester Stallone goes, I am the law, and then, fucks everybody's shit up for 2 hours. That's what I feel like that movie is.
Okay.
Oh, also, Rob Schneider is there for some reason. Also, there was a mechanical, judge in that thing. That looked terrible. That looked terrible. I hope that thing didn't have plot relevance that made me want to go see the 1990 version of this version of Judge. For inexplicably, that made me really into it.
Grant, are you there with him?
I think that is I think every single 90s action film, except for like maybe Die Hard, is kind of mushed into the same thing. I think that movie is probably unintentionally hilarious.
Yeah.
When Rob Schneider was literally just making fun of Sylvester Stallone's voice. Yeah. Oh my god. You know, I wouldn't watch that unless I absolutely had to. But I can't deny that trailer's freaking hilarious.
Yeah, I will say that the movie is much more serviceable as a movie than it is as a Judge Dredd movie. The problem that they had was that the director wanted to make this dark satire, which was more in line with how Dredd was conceived, and Sylvester Stallone wanted to make an action comedy. And so it ended up being this weird mix of both that did not work out. So Dredd became a pretty big cultural sensation growing up. You know, leaving Lucky Lindy, crossing the Atlantic, and heading to comic book shops when I was a kid, and seeing Dredd on comics. It was a lot of... I don't know that he had an American publisher, but when he showed up, it would usually be like Batman versus Judge Dredd, or the Aliens or the Predators versus Judge Dredd, published from Dark Horse. And some of those got really good, but, you know... in keeping with the idea, I feel like whenever they went to make the 2012 movie, they went, what can we do to be the exact opposite of Sylvester Stallone's take on Judge Dredd? And how can we be a good movie? So I wanted us to look at, well, if you remember my initial pitch for it, I thought we would look at it as social commentary, but we'll talk about why I don't actually think that ends up working out like I wanted it to. So I've kind of, since then, I've redirected into, like, what makes good science fiction. Whenever I listen to a podcast and they start referencing or using language that somebody else on a podcast listened to, like, for some reason, every gaming podcast started using the phrase, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. And it just, like, you just kind of, like, saw it make the round from literally every gaming podcast to find out who's listening to who. One of the podcasts I listened to, one of them talked about the quote from Frederick Pohl, who's a 3-time Hugo Award winner, which is a science fiction award. And he said that a good science fiction story should be able to predict not the automobile, but the traffic jam. So, like, the technology is in fact the least interesting thing about a science fiction story. The problem resulting from the technology or the advancement is the interesting thing. So that'll end up being that's kind of what I want to ultimately focus on for Dredd and Starship. But first, let's get on board with Grant. What are your first thoughts watching these two movies? Where do they fall on the SpongeBob to Berserk squeamish scale for Grant?
Oh boy. You know, I don't want to yak anybody's yum. First off, with Dredd, I watched this film with my dad, and he was like, why are we watching that crap? I was like, what are you talking about? Because he only knew the 1995 version, and apparently, like, that is the pinnacle 90s action track. Dredd, I feel like we're going to have, once again, I think Andrew and I are going to have not complete opposite opinions, but definitely a difference. I thought both films were good, right? I think they're good in different ways, completely different ways. I think Dredd is not the movie that I would typically enjoy watching, and I think it was weird as hell to see Carl Urban without like an Australian accent, but very dark, not really at all on the nose on the satirical level, versus Starship Troopers, which in my eyes, maybe just because I knew we were kind of looking at through that lens, I thought that was the most obvious satirical dump ever, and a total B movie, but I love it.
All right, Victor, you've seen both the movies before, and you pitched Berserk, which is obviously at the height of our gore scale.
Yeah, I'm not a very squeamish person.
Yeah.
Medical backgrounds will
But
do that to you.
How do you feel about these particular, like, what are your thoughts on these movies?
All right. As far as like gore is concerned,
Anyway.
or like, in any way, man, Dredd is such a beautiful movie. I don't mean beautiful the way Shawshank Redemption is beautiful. I mean like visually very entertaining. I wasn't moved by Dredd when he asked, "Are you ready? You look ready." That didn't. I know that was kind of Batman-y. I feel like that's what Carl Urban was going for too. Was kind of like his version of Christian Bale's Batman voice. It's a fantastic film. I love the new Dredd. I'm very upset that it didn't do well enough at the box office. I imagine that it was haunted by Sylvester Stallone's version, and people had the same assumption that Grant's dad did, and that's ultimately what affected its success. But I thought it totally merited a sequel that I would definitely watch. Great film. As far as Starship Troopers is concerned, I also love it as a B movie. I'm not really a B movie type guy, but I liked Starship Troopers despite the fact I felt it came off kind of like far more comedically,
right,
than maybe it was attempting to. Maybe that's probably why I can also see it but I don't really pick up the satire elements. Like, I think it's just funny to me. It doesn't seem to be overtly criticizing their behavior. I guess I would be one of those people who would be like, the movie was just presenting these ideas, but not necessarily in a way that inspired criticism. You know what I mean?
Because that was the original. That's why it got such poor ratings initially, right? Because people took it super seriously. Is that right, Andrew?
People in the 90s were fucking stupid, dude. It's not, that's why South Park was created. It was just to take the piss out of people who had like these super hypersensibilities to complete garbage. Like, Starship Troopers isn't offensive to anybody. Starship Troopers can't hurt you.
I feel like you just described people now far more accurately than you described people in the 1990s when this thing was made. I don't think you get Starship Troopers theatrical release in 2020.
But that's precisely my point. It's actually kind of cyclical. It's cyclical. A lot of people who were like actually alive during I don't count myself as actually alive during the 90s, despite the fact that I was born in 1995, because I'm like, you don't come online until you're like 4. So everything before that doesn't really count.
Wouldn't you be 4 in the 90s still?
Yeah, in 99, which is like the last 10th of the 90s. So it doesn't count. It doesn't count. I didn't start experiencing the world until the 2000s, and by that point, it's no longer the 90s by chronological definition. But it's kind of our attitudes for what's socially acceptable is cyclical, though. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the case.
And okay, well, I didn't have any notes preparing me to talk about the cyclical nature of culture from 1990s to 2020, so I'm not going to even attempt it. But as someone who, again, mourned the Titanic and then went to go watch Starship Troopers in the theaters when it came out, which is funny because Roger Ebert called it the most violent kiddie movie that he'd ever seen. I saw it when it came out. I didn't get it as a concept of anything because, as you say, Victor, when you're young, you don't necessarily think of it. I wasn't equipped to engage Starship Troopers in that way.
Right.
I do think like they're making very clear, pointed like parallels. Like, a lot of fascist imagery gets brought in. They use the same camera angles and shots from Nazi propaganda films. I think it's a commentary on militarism and the fact that their whole society is centered on it.
Yeah.
I don't know how one doesn't walk away seeing the movie being critical of those things. Like, it presents conflict as a perpetual motion machine. Like, we fight the bugs so that we can continue to fight. Just like in Dredd, they're in this constant war against crime, but they're not doing anything to actually solve crime. Like, there definitely should be a defund the judges movement in Dredd. Like, they're living in an ivory tower with drones, and they've chipped literally everyone in their mega city so that they know if you live or die. And they, like, that's, so going into the commentary part, like, the world building in Dredd, what little they provided, I think does a lot with the satire. Like, the idea, again, Difa, like, the judges are responding to crime, but they're not, there's nothing, they don't present anything that solves crime. The head judge, whenever they go to Anderson's training, is like, we're in a war, Dredd, and we're losing. But they don't actually say what they're losing to. Like, is this the war on drugs or war on terror that you're never going to win?
It's just
yeah, you're just in a war so that you can continue justifying your way of life, which is, for all of its faults and dumb stuff, is also the point of Starship Troopers. Like, you're just in a war to continue being in war. Like, you're fighting mindless bugs. You're doing these things so that you can continue doing these things and justifying your way of life.
I think that Judge Dredd does a better job in the sense that I never got the impression in Starship Troopers that humanity was on the brink. Like, that never occurred to me watching the entire movie. I'm like, I don't feel desperation. It really does feel like a manufactured issue to kill these insects.
Right, which is the utopian dystopian fascism. Like, it's of course it's manufactured issues.
But when you arrive to Dredd, I'm like, well, humanity literally suffered like a nuclear apocalypse and everything looks like squalor. That, for me, I was like, I could see this being slightly more justified than whatever's going on in Starship Troopers. For me, it doesn't provide... It doesn't check that same box of dystopian, utopian fascism. It's not the same. For me, when I look at Judge Dredd, I'm like, okay, well, if humanity literally was on the brink of extinction and most of the planet was irradiated, yeah, you would probably have to resolve to extreme measures to keep everything in order. Like, the argument that the society should probably be a little bit kinder would still be a valid one. Like, obviously they should still have like welfare programs. They shouldn't just give all the money to the judges to make sure everybody stays in line. They should try to improve the life of the average citizen. But that is a lot harder an argument to make when literally everyone you know could possibly die.
Why can they all die?
Well, from like, the chaos of like all of these people rioting, crime is running rampant. I imagine if the infrastructure of the city breaks down, like the radiation gets in, kills everybody.
Okay. So is crime running rampant and everybody rioting because they live in an authoritarian, like, they don't give us the answers to these questions is the ultimate point.
Right.
Like, that's why once I was in it, that ultimately for me, and I'll get to this point later for like the further comparing the 94 movie to the current. Well, I'll go ahead and do it. Essentially, this movie is a bottle episode. That may be why ultimately the movie doesn't do anything. Like, if you look at that trailer for the 94 Judge Dredd, you can tell they go everywhere in the course of that movie. They're in the Outlands. You get to see so much of Judge Dredd world. This movie...
Yeah, he even gets arrested, so you get to see the jails.
You get to see the justice system in action for the judges. This one is like 5 to 15... It was like 15 minutes maybe outside the world, and then they are locked into the building. Like, it's... Abed's bottle episode. They have to work their way up, and it feels more like an episode of a TV show than your average movie. Which I very much enjoyed, and I thought it worked. You don't get the impressions of the wider world. The impressions you get are the things like the very few things you get are this world is violent. It is hyper-violent. They have a gigantic shootout in a food court, and then as they're leaving, you hear the automated message of the food court will reopen in 30 minutes as they're dragging the bodies away for to get made into Soylent or whatever.
I to go on to that point, at the very end of the film, when they're talking about if Anderson passed or not, that one judge was like, you kind of look a little rough there. Dredd, are you okay? And Dredd was like, just another day in the office, essentially. So even that bottle episode, like that is literally daily life for that man.
If he had said that as casually, the movie would have gone from like an 8 to a 10. He was like, well, it's just another day at the office.
I'm about to go get my cup of Joe.
And then credits.
I think that they were talking about her, and I think the actual line is, well, did she pass? She looking a little rough. Did she pass? And she goes, yeah, she passed. Or she's good or whatever. I think that's an important point of the movie, because both, like, in a comparison, both movies are about zealots, like people who are believing wholeheartedly in this thing. Michael Ironside's the teacher. I think in the Casper Van Dyne's character ends up, Johnny Rico, he ends up, I think they all end up being pretty well zealots in Starship Troopers by the end of it. Like, they get hardened and are just in the line. Like, nobody is questioning the bug fight at the end. Am I wrong?
No, not
right. So if anything, you get to see people get radicalized and made into zealots. And so, like, what's the main thing about zealots and zealotry? Like, they don't compromise. And I think you like Dredd's arc is the opposite. Like, at the beginning, he's talking about Anderson, and they're trying to sell him as her. She just didn't pass by 3 points. It's like, she didn't just not pass, she failed. And personally, I loved Carl Urban in this movie, and I loved everything he said. I thought it was a great laconic wit, which is how Batman should be. Just like one or two words. Like, one of my favorite lines is, "I'm wondering why you haven't put your helmet on yet. It's just, it interferes with my psychic abilities." I think a bullet would interfere more. To your point, like we talked about, good movies will always have a little bit of humor in it, and I think that this movie generally accomplishes that. I don't think Starship Troopers does. I think Starship Troopers is a fairly joyless, blank Nazi movie.
I think Starship Trooper does have some humor in it, but it is unintentional. It is very unintentional. It's not like it was well thought out, like, oh, that was a clever joke. It's just like, this is ridiculous. How could I not laugh?
Actually, I take that back. Now that I'm remembering scenes, like at the end sequence in particular, I remember is very funny.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely intentionally
crazy.
funny. So I take that back. But most of the action in the movie is completely joyless. And the parts that are funny are the parts that take you out of the movie, like the "Are you still watching?" like the little weblog things are great.
I think Starship Troopers is like total whiplash is the only way to fully describe it. I thought I was on the nose, especially like in literally the very beginning of the film is an ad where a kid is playing an art, and then you have another ad where they're all squishing the bugs and like, do your part to. I don't know. I think maybe that's just because like I said, I was anticipating the satire, so I thought it was funnier than it was for y'all. I thought there are some scenes that are dropped. I thought the movie was way too long.
Yeah. 2
hours and 9 minutes. That was a long 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Yeah.
But there are some scenes where I was just like laughing my ass.
Which is, again, I think the strength of comparing the two movies. Like, Dredd as a bottle episode, it kind of knows what it needs to do. Like, we're starting at the bottom, we're getting to the top. If anything, the weak part of Dredd for me was when the 3 crooked judges came in, just because I'm like, this creates undeserved questions about the world that haven't been set up. Like, they could have set it up with a simple line of dialogue, but the fact that suddenly Mama has a line to corrupt judges feels like it's just drawn. Like, I would have rather had some other plot development. The fact that you're bringing in corrupt judges in this world makes the world much more interesting, but we don't get to explore how it's interesting. Does that make sense?
Right. No, I totally agree with that. It opens up the...
Ironically, Victor, to your point, I've heard there are rumors that they're going to make a Mega City TV show that Urban may show up in every now and then.
Oh my god. That would be so amazing.
And that was a fairly recent report I read, but obviously COVID has derailed most things. But so that might provide more. That might be worth a revisit in the future to see how, like, what the world is of Mega City. Because, like I said, in my head, this Dredd movie was going to be rife with satire and social commentary, and especially contrast, like, the idea that the judges are serving as judge, jury, executioner, policeman, all in one, just seems very relevant to today's society. But even the judges are working with, well, can't kill him on 99%. Seems like it's kind of a stricter code of conduct than what we enforce in the real world.
I think that the movie does bring up like some interesting points about like the nature of law, and perhaps, for example, I'll just jump into the example. It'll illuminate my point. So, like in the very beginning of the film, when Dredd is walking into the Mega City block, Peach Trees or whatever the neighborhood is called, there's like this homeless guy that's at the door, and Dredd is like, "I'm going to give you 2 weeks in the cubes if I come back and you're still here." Which seems like really harsh. You're going to put this guy in a total isolation chamber for 2 weeks because he's a vagrant. For vagrancy.
Right.
And then Dredd goes inside, and, well, an emergency happens, and the giant metal doors come down, and the homeless guy is still there, and he gets crushed to death. Like, examining that situation, yes, the punishment was very harsh. On the other hand, I mean, that's probably a better... I mean, It was to avoid him getting crushed by a giant metal door. Like, 2 weeks in the cubes is preferable, by far.
I mean, that logic jumps into knowing that him saying the 2 weeks in the cube knows that his ultimate fate is to get crushed by the door, which he did not.
Right, but he is taking that risk, though, by being there. And there has to be a deterrent.
I don't get the feeling those doors coming down is a common thing.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, that's not something that's going to happen.
Like, that's not... Like, they know... It seemed like a big deal. They have to schedule those tests and everything else. Like, that's a pretty big leap of logic.
Obviously, it's an emergency. Those metal doors coming down outside of a planned training exercise is a rare event. But it is something that they planned for. Like, obviously, they have those simulations in the event that they legitimately have to do them. So, the fact that the guy is hanging out there is... to a certain degree irresponsible, because today could be the day that this event happens. That's why they have this punishment in order to dissuade people from hanging out in that particular spot.
Well, I mean, I don't think the punishment was about that spot. I think it was about him being a vagrant. If he had been 2 feet to the left or right, he still would have been arrested for vagrancy.
I don't know. I remember specifically in the scene, he's like, Dredd is like, you can't hang out here. Like, if he did that inside of the apartment facility, would he have still been arrested? I have no idea. That's kind of like a bit hypothetical, but I do remember in the scene, Judge Dredd specifically mentions, you can't hang out here in this emergency zone. I'm going to give you 2 weeks in the cubes when I come back.
Andrew, I have a question.
Yep.
I wanted to get your perspective, because one thing that kind of confused me on Dredd was, like, do you believe the film was saying that Dredd isn't necessarily a good indication of what justice is, but he's the best of what's available? Because, like, you do have situations like that, where he's like, okay, 2 weeks in the ISO cube just for, dawdling around, but then he saves those 2 kids by stunning them instead of outright murdering them.
Right, which I assumed was absolutely... Honestly, I think that was just a directorial, an authorial decision to not make Dredd irredeemable. Like, if Dredd kills those kids, then even his turn at the end of being like, Anderson broke these rules, our Judge Dredd at the beginning would not allow her to pass, but our Judge Dredd now, having gone through this scenario with her, has softened just that marginal amount. So I think he keeps those kids alive because even if he kills them, then he does not earn any amount of retribution at the end. And I do think the movie is critical of Dredd. There is one moment, and I was going to get your opinion on if Starship Troopers did the same thing, kind of, but there's the technique of what you're telling us versus what you're showing us. So, Starship Troopers uses the Nazi propaganda films to be like, this is bad. Like, if you're picturing something else right now, you should know that these are bad things. There's the moment when Dredd is over the intercoms to all of Peachtrees where he talks about Mama, and that's his I'm the law moment. Mama is not the law. I am the law. But he has a moment where he says Mama is a murderer. And it doesn't go to the people Mama murdered, it goes to the people Dredd just shot down.
Right.
So I do think the movie is critical of even the justice system in this moment. Not totally, but that, I think, at the end of the day, Dredd was about being a badass action science fiction movie, not about telling us anything. So it had that unity of purpose that the 94 movie didn't have. Victor, you agree? I
agree with you. Because I think for something to be valid criticism, you can't just point out a flaw and then say, well, there's that flaw. For it to be really constructive criticism, you need to provide an alternative. I think that the notion that Dredd is a murderer because he also killed people is kind of facile. He's a member of the state, and therefore he is one of the few people who is authorized to use violence as a corrective measure. The reason our justice system exists is precisely so that people don't take it upon themselves to administer justice according to their personal whims. That's why it's different if I kill a murderer versus, the police catching said murderer and putting them to death. So I think that comparison where they're like, oh, Judge Dredd is also a murderer. Look at all these people he killed. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, he's a killer, but he's not a murderer. He's authorized to do this by all of our consent, presumably. Although in their case, do they even live in a democracy?
Well, that's
is that
part
even
of the
established?
thing is that I don't think we know enough about the world to be able to make a judgment.
To have that kind of...
I mean, personally, the same thing that I would say as a criticism today is that I'm not comfortable with agents of the state having the ability to execute people. That's generally, my criticism with things going on out on the streets right now. Like, I bet he has a lot more kill bullets than he has stun bullets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the stun bullets seem to work pretty much just as effectively.
Just fine.
So, I mean...
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm not saying it's a deep-seated criticism. I'm saying it's a moment to make you think. It's the moment to cast a doubt over everything that you've just seen. Like, is Dredd as bad as Mama? Maybe, based on the end. Like, at the end, he is a sadistic torturer who gives her a bunch of puffs of slow-mo and then does to her the same thing she did to the people she was trying to punish. Like, he tortured her and threw her off the balcony.
Poetic
Don't
justice.
get me wrong, like, he was making the measured stance of, I thought the ending mirrored Game of Thrones very well. I know it's me bringing it up this time, but
there it is.
I was trying to avoid
Mama,
that.
like, she's basically Cersei at King's Landing saying, I'm
She
totally
is Cersei.
alone. I can't win, but you'll have to destroy everything to take me in. I think you better surrender. And Dredd's just like, nah. Same thing as Danny, essentially. Just like, no. But, Dredd makes a choice to not destroy everything. Danny makes a different choice.
Well, technically, Judge Dredd doesn't know if that's going to work when he pushes her out of the window.
Right, but he still made the choice.
I don't know if the detonator.
Right,
but the choice could have destroyed everything. Like, I don't think... He was kind of like flipping a coin. Whereas Danny was like, I'm going to destroy all of King's Landing. Dredd is like, I might destroy this entire building. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, he was taking a measured chance, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Also, but you're right. The slow-mo technically would still be gratuitous from his point of view.
Right.
Although it made for a sick shot in the movie, so I'll allow it.
Yeah, that's the forgiving thing. Also, to the point of why the movie maybe didn't do so well is because it originally came out in 3D. Like, the original title for the movie was Dredd 3D, which is how I saw it. And unlike most movies, like, it came out a little too late on the 3D train, a little too far after Avatar to capitalize. So it was a gimmicked movie release, which is funny because of all the movies I saw in 3D, Dredd really did the best. Like, all those moments where the colors kind of went off, pretty much any slow-mo scene was basically a 3D scene. And they were very good in the theaters. But yeah, like, the police in Dredd Society, like, you don't just get police brutality of your body. You get police brutality of the mind. Like, she made Avon piss himself. Like, she screwed up with his mind enough to get exactly what she needed and torture him into pissing himself. And it ends with sadistic murder. I don't think we're supposed to walk away with a good view of the judges. Like, society, like, the whole thing is bad.
Yeah. I don't think about any stretch of the imagination, unless you're like a sadist, that, oh yeah, these guys are
These
cool.
are the good guys.
I was just more or less being like, do you think that they had any sort of potential for change down the line, or do you think he's kind of stuck in that?
I do think he is given, like, his whole thing with Anderson, like I said, is he is slightly less of a zealot, which part of zealotry is, like, you shouldn't have the capacity of change, or the capacity to bring up a different point of view. So I think the Starship Troopers folks, pretty zealous. I think Dredd, like, turned it down, like, 1/2 notch. Which is a move. Like, his whole, like, he's a comic book character. His main trait, like, asking him not to be Judge Dredd would be like asking actually, they did end up asking Captain America not to be Star Spangled Awesome. That's a bad example. But, like, asking Iron Man not to be this snarky tech know-it-all. Yeah. Like, it's part of that character. If anybody is the real protagonist, it's probably Anderson.
What did you think about Anderson?
I thought she was fine.
I don't know. Is she relevant in the comic?
I'm from what I remember, I haven't read the comics too much, but in the reading I've done about she ends up, like, she's still a psychic, and she ends up battling, I think it's called Judge Death, which is a eldritch horror type creature that she imprisons in her mind because she's the most powerful psychic or something to that effect. So she does get a badass arc in the comics.
See, I was like a little bit, and I think that this might have been the reason why I wasn't just loving the film, was Anderson. And I don't know if it was just like, I didn't love Olivia. Is it Thirlby? Olivia Thirlby? Is that her name?
No idea.
Wasn't just like amazed by her performance. I think that might have been what was kind of putting me off about it. But I also just didn't get like, it was just like at the very beginning, like, oh yeah, she's a psychic. And there was no other explanation of there being psychics in the world.
She's a mutant.
So I think that just like put me out of it a little bit. But to contrast that, I did like how when she was fighting the one female judge, or like she was about to go up against her, instead of what word am I trying to say? Instead of trying to reason with the judge, she was like, oh no, she's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Off with her head.
Well, I think that's part of, like, number one, again, in that this movie wanted to do the opposite of what the 94 movie did. They had already given Dredd a plucky sidekick in Rob Schneider in 94. So they, like, her whole thing is she's trying to be a judge. She is partnered with Dredd, who has a certain reputation. So she's not gonna be... She's going to try to mirror him in as much as possible.
Also, like, the judges are allowed to be judge, jury, and executioner in this world. Like, if you take it and look at it from her perspective, you have another judge that was willing to kill her and is also a traitor. So the proper judgment, I guess, would be death. So her killing that other judge, instead of trying to reason with them, I think is perfectly in line with within the context of the world.
I think Gray's just going with, in most movies, in most comic book movies, especially, you would have the moment where they would try to talk themselves out of fighting, like, why are you doing this? You're a judge too. You swore to uphold the law and yada yada yada.
Right.
And instead she just shoots her in the face.
I actually found that kind of refreshing.
That's what we're saying.
Without a doubt refreshing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was literally like, I was gonna be quite annoyed if we're gonna have another 5-minute spiel about the goodness of humanity, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Nope, Anderson is just like, dude, screw.
I think the weakest part of the whole movie is like the guy speeching Dredd at the end whenever he's like, wait.
Right.
Like, that went on about 2 or 3 monologues too
Dredd,
long.
yeah.
Like, it should have been like, wait. And then he says, is that all you had to say? Why should I wait? And then he's like, for her to shoot you.
Sure.
And then, yeah.
Exactly. Because I was like, does he see Anderson, like, in the background? Like, if so, why is Anderson just, like, waiting there?
Yeah.
Like,
she thought he was talking to her.
She wanted him to finish his monologue.
I thought that was the weakest. That was the one really, in as much as I thought the addition of the 3 judges was bad, it compounded because it led to that scene.
Dredd somehow knew saying wait was going to make this guy take like a 3-minute monologue instead of just hesitating for just the second needed for him to get
right.
home.
Which again develops the character. Like when I watched this with my fiance who had no idea anything about Judge Dredd. So like this is the only time it builds up that Dredd has this real like this badass persona about him. Like otherwise you're just watching this movie where the guy's killing everybody and is a total badass, and this is the one moment that lets you know, oh, he's a total badass all the time. And it came 10 minutes, 15 minutes before the movie is over, where you've gotten all the evidence already.
Also, really quickly, did you find the inclusion of like actors that you know have greater skill than what Starship Troopers would allow? Like their inclusion in the film was really distracting. I remember seeing
good actors.
remember seeing one of the cops from The Wire. I think the guy who played Lieutenant Carver. He's in like the last 30 to 40 minutes of Starship Troopers.
I mean, I wouldn't. That's just a working actor getting a gig. I mean,
yeah, I know, but I was just like, it's crazy how he goes from Starship Troopers to The Wire. That's like one hell of a career jump.
Did you happen to notice any other interesting, Grant, we talked a little bit earlier about how Diet Busey is in Starship Troopers, but in Dredd, did you spot anybody? I realized today a big early role for somebody.
Oh, yes. What is her name? Lena Headey?
Well, I mean, that was obvious. That's not even him.
Oh, I thought you were just testing me, and I was like gonna alley.
I am testing you, but I'm not testing you with alley.
That would have been a good
easiest
warm up.
Yeah.
Grant just went all out on
I was
the
like, I
warm-up,
pass,
but-
yes.
The guy who plays the computer dude is General Hux.
Yeah, computer
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
That's right.
That's Dominic Gleason. I don't know how to say his first name. Domon Gleason.
In the in the Judge Dredd movie, he vaguely looks like Shaggy from
I thought
the
that too.
live-action Scooby-Doo movie.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah. I do want to end with circling back to our big question. Like, so what is the traffic jam that Dredd and Starship Troopers are, like, foreshadowing? Like, are these good science fiction movies? Grant's frozen.
Oh, I thought Grant was just smiling and waiting for. I see it. I'm like, that's kind of creepy, but no, he's actually.
It's amazing how
just
every time he freezes, it's always a smile.
The smiley
he's just
guy.
he's just a happy camper, rocking and a rolling.
I don't think Dredd is traditional. Like it's less focused on the science fiction aspect. Actually, no, I'm gonna take that back. Based off of the actual quotation that you said, the traffic jam, I think Dredd is like the perfect encapsulation because it is way less on the cool guns, mumbo jumbo, and the super high structure, and it's more about how the fascist, like the colonialism and how the dystopian future kind of screws up our entire society. And I think Starship Troopers, I don't know, it's weird because I like Starship Troopers more as like a fun movie, but maybe not as a good sci-fi, more of an action.
I see Dredd as not as like the traffic jam, but like a car accident. There's not enough of the world and not enough context to see like the entire. You know what I mean?
Like a fender bender.
It doesn't. It's not enough. It's a great movie, right? But there's not enough of it to really say like, oh, this is all the problems that the system is like anticipating. It hints at a greater criticism, but doesn't provide it. And Starship Troopers, I mean, I don't. I found all the Nazi iconography like funny. I thought it was hilarious. I think that Starship Troopers is like a good watch for people if you want to not take Nazis seriously, which I think is a good way of disarming their entire. I don't mean like obviously the ideology is not dangerous, but I think a good way of disarming that kind of idea is to consider it ridiculous. Like Starship Troopers is over the top and hilarious, and again, I also don't see it as a traffic jam. I just think it's funny. It's a funny movie. It's not satire. It's just, unless the point of it was to be so ridiculous that I would think that fascism is. I don't know what Starship Troopers is trying to say. So no, it's also not a traffic jam. It's not good sci-fi in that aspect. It's a great popcorn movie, but
I would love to hear your thoughts though.
I'll go with Starship Troopers first. Like, it was originally written, like, the reason one of my friends really likes that movie is because he is a Marine, and Robert Heinlein was also in the military. So what I learned in doing a little bit of research is that Starship Troopers gets classified into an even more niche genre of science fiction, and that's military science fiction. So, like, I'm not equipped to say that how they set themselves up in, like, corps, how they operate. Like, maybe the science fiction aspect of Starship Troopers is supposed to be, like, just how their military is organized. But in terms of science fiction, I don't think it's giving us anything. I think it's absolutely a satire because it's playing it absolutely straight with everything. Like, it's presenting the earnest look at again, aside from the weblogs, nobody is like winking at the camera too much. So I think it's absolutely meant to be like, well, you know, we had these pacifists, they were completely obliterated. It's the perpetual, like I said earlier, the perpetual motion conflict machine. Like, you create a militarized society, it only gets to survive by having a military, and it only gets to survive by the military being relevant, and therefore you have to manufacture a conflict at all times. Hence, you give yourself the job of destroying all ants all across the universe. Like, you give yourself an impossible task that always makes expansion and militarism necessary. Like, that's the criticism, I think, of the movie, and the ultimate danger of it is that people who live regular lives aren't citizens because only people who go into the military are citizens. I think Dredd... So I think that's the traffic jam of anything, but I don't think that's the traffic jam the source material anticipated. That's the traffic jam Paul Verhoeven is telling us about, like, this sort of militarism. So I think in that way, that's more political than really anything else. So, I mean, and the idea of maybe the problem of coming in contact with aliens is that we only want to fight those aliens all the time, and we just become more militaristic as a way to fight against the other all the time. Like, that might be this traffic jam there. In RoboCop, I think the traffic jam is similar. You know, you anticipate Dirty Harry, and you take that all the way to the extreme of, here is the cop who is the law, who is the person who makes the ultimate decision on if somebody lives or dies, regardless of jury. Like, I think I think what Judge Dredd anticipates is Americans fetishizing police officers, but not the legal system. Like, we assume the legal system is corrupt, but certain sects assume that police officers are incorruptible, and the ones that do get corruptible are not indicative of larger problems. So I think Dredd anticipates the problems of leaning into individuals as enforcers and giving too much power to one group and glorifying the person on the street too much to make too many big decisions. So in that way, I do think Dredd is anticipating a very relevant traffic jam. It seems like a good way to close out. I don't have a lot of other thoughts.
Did you know Starship Troopers started as an anime?
Shut up.
I've been wanting to say that for the past hour now. Started as an anime.
Did you say started as an anime?
The first adaptation after the book was an anime. It was in 1988, which means it's probably going to be absolutely trash.
Yeah, I did not
I'm going to watch it, and I'll let y'all know how absolutely terrible it is.
You can watch that. Victor, have you watched any of the direct-to-TV, direct-to-video movies?
No, I've wanted to, just for, like, not out of a genuine desire to, like, exactly, that's exactly, it was out of, like, a scholarly, just, I wanted to be complete. I'm like, I get all the Starship Troopers references in the Harold and Kumar movie where they make them, like, that's why I wanted to watch the direct-to-video movies. Also, I want to know if this series has something to say at some point. Like 6 hours of Starship Troopers, and I'm like, oh, so war is bad. It finally said something, you know?
Did you get your answer?
I haven't watched them, though. I haven't watched them. I want to.
All right. Well, Victor, what do you have us watching next?
I can't talk about it.
Oh, what?
The first rule is I can't talk about it. And the second rule is I'm not allowed to pitch it. And the third rule is no shirts, no shoes. It's Fight Club. Yeah, that's right. I haven't seen the movie in a long time. I thought this would be a great opportunity to revisit it. And also, I mean, I read the book when I was in high school because it was there. And I was like, oh, I've seen the movie. Let's see what the book's about. So if you want to read that, it's actually like a pretty quick read. Should be doable in 2 weeks. I'm not overtly recommending it. We can keep it confined to the movie. But yeah, I want to pitch Fight Club. I want to talk about that. I want to get your opinions on it.
I have been waiting. So I feel like I'm such a fake movie fan because I say I love movies and I say I've watched this and I've watched that. I've been waiting for an excuse to watch Fight.
Here's your excuse.
There we go.
It's a
I
signed
can't wait
homework.
to break out every freshman year dorm room poster of the Fight Club movie poster.
Right next to
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
I actually never bought, like, outside of like a copy of the movie because I like the movie, I never bought merchandise for Fight Club because I'm like, that kind of defeats the anti-consumerism message of the movie. Message.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. You'll know. You'll know when
I
you
was
watch
definitely
it.
the type of guy that have those super overused pictures. I had which one did I have? I had it's not a movie poster, but it's the one with all those girls in the background. They're all Pink Floyd, different album covers. Yep, you guys know them. They had the Bob Marley one because everyone has that. I'm the most cliche, but love it or hate it. Love me or hate it.
Can't relate, Grant. The most modern thing I have on my wall is like an Assassin's Creed Brotherhood poster.
Well, there you have it. Next episode in 2 weeks from In 2 weeks, we will be watching and pitching you on Fight Club. So, with that being said, my handy dandy notes here. Make sure to follow this podcast. Spread the word. Follow us on social media that we now have. It's super exciting and fun. And we're going for a bigger social media push in the next coming weeks. So make sure to follow us at pod_pitch on Twitter, on Instagram, The Pitch Pod, YouTube, The Pitch Pod. Make sure to spam us with all your questions, thoughts, criticisms, hate mail, love mail, etc. Please leave a review. Please tell a friend. Please tell all your friends. Please tell all your friends to leave a review. It would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. And then, most importantly, make sure to interact with us by wasting your next couple weeks obsessing over Fight Club. Any of you guys have anything to say before I cue it?
Cue Space Rock.
All right. Cue Space Rock.
Just keep saying it.
Rock.
Cue Space Rock. All right, now all three of us.
3,
1,
2,
2,
Cue Space Rock.
Cue Space Rock.
Cue Space Rock.